Welcome back, guys. This is Kobe speaking, and today what we're going to talk about is Boolean operations. And I'm going to cover some of the basic stuff first, like your typical Boolean operations like unity, subtract, and difference. And then once I'm done, I'm going to actually continue showing it in a more practical way on the actual project that we've been working on in class. So just a note, if you guys want the actual scene file, just comment and so obviously subscribe below, and I will make sure that you guys get the files. So first things first, I'm going to open up the polygon submenu set on the right hand side, I mean the left hand side. I'm going to make sure I go to polygons over here. And then within the submenu set, you have all the tools for polygon modeling. In the drop-down menu, mesh drop-down menu, you'll see there's an option here at the top called Booleans, and I'm going to tear off the strip line there at the top. And then from this, you'll see you've got three different operations. Now, briefly talking about each, union is essentially a combination of the two objects that you have selected, and that kind of meshes them together as if you combined them, but it leaves some nasty triangles and n-gons that you have to go and clean up afterwards. Difference is essentially just a subtraction of one from the other, depending on which order you have them selected. And finally, intersect is the common difference between the two once they have been subtracted. So I'm going to apply them in a more practical way so you guys can actually see how they work and what they do. So I'm going to zoom out a bit, and I already have a little test subject here. I've got a cube and a sphere that we're going to subtract from each other, or union or combine and so on. So first of all, I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to hit combine. So once I do the union, you'll see it essentially generates a brand new mesh. In fact, I'm going to undo one step back and actually open up the outliner and show you guys what this looks like. There's my outliner. I'll make this slightly smaller. I'm going to frame on the two objects, pressing F. And then right there at the bottom, you'll see there's a cube and then the sphere. Once I hit union, you'll actually see that it went ahead and actually created this brand new combined mesh. It's called pcube51. So what this means, essentially, it extracted the two shape nodes and combined them together, and it connected some triangles to make sense of how it wants to connect them. And at the same time, you end up with these transform nodes, the original objects that essentially allow you to, even after the fact, be able to move this around, and that will in turn update the actual result of the mesh. So I can literally go ahead and move these two shapes independent from each other, and then your combined mesh would then update accordingly. So in any such situation where you do any type of Boolean and you're happy with the result, it's always a good idea to make sure you go ahead and you clear your history. Once you do that, those two transform nodes will disappear, and there's no way for me to essentially go back again and break them apart as if they were two separate objects. So to go ahead to the next one, I need to undo all the way before we did that initial subtraction, and there we go. I'm going to go ahead and try difference this time. The difference essentially subtracts the one from the other, and you'll see the intersected piece being cut out. If I were to select the opposite order, where I have this one selected and then this one, and I do that, you'll see the inverse of the subtraction is then applied. This shape by itself is quite complex in design. It would have taken me quite a bit of time to actually cut into it and get it to look this clean and this smooth in design. But it will always leave some nasty triangles and n-gons that we might have to clean up afterwards. That's just a typical workflow thing that we have to consider when working with Booleans. So just to demonstrate the intersection piece that I was referring to earlier, if I were to select them and I hit intersect, essentially that leaves the piece that kind of connects the two, the common grounds between the two. And if I go to a wireframe just quickly, you can essentially see where these two intersect. That's the piece that gets stripped out, and then everything else gets deleted afterwards. So now that you guys have a basic understanding of the Boolean operations, the union, difference, and intersect, I'm going to go ahead and actually show you guys in a more practical way where we're going to apply this and what we're going to do to it. So as you know, in the actual project that we've been doing in class, we were talking about designing very simple primitive-like objects and getting them to a degree where we can actually work with them as separate parts. So we talked about making each of these individual pieces, and we're obviously working off of some reference from the internet that I grabbed, and this is the reference that we've been using for the whole time. And so what we're going to do is actually subtract or have a difference subtraction into the mesh to kind of create these indentations into the model. Now obviously there's many ways of approaching it, but what we're going to do is first of all tackle the Boolean operation, and I'm going to put the image off to the side. You guys do not need to see that as of now. But we're essentially going to try two different methods. We're going to do the Boolean first, and then I'm going to show you a different approach where you do not need Booleans and you actually work from the inside outwards. So this is the typical result of a Boolean operation once we have subtracted everything. And then also we have to make sure that our edge flow and each point that gets Boolean into another mesh is connected properly by using a multi-cut, merge vertex tool, and so on and so forth to get it as clean as possible. Each edge coming off of the Boolean subtraction needs to be connected properly, otherwise the mesh will not respond the way it's supposed to, and we're going to have some technical difficulties. With everything, Booleans require a clean mesh, and if you have any n-gons, if you have any floating vertices and so on, it's something that we have to consider that might prevent the Boolean operation from working successfully. So always, if you check that your Boolean operation does not work for some reason, like one mesh disappears from another, it simply means that you need to go and look at your original mesh, check if it's clean, and then if it's not, get rid of all the problems, and then the Boolean operation usually succeeds. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually build a separate piece that will subtract into the mesh, pretty much like this one over here. I'm gonna start off with a simple cylinder. I'm gonna double click over here. That's gonna bring up my tool settings. It's off to the side, and I'm gonna make sure I set that to an axis division of 16. My reason will become clear very soon. I'm going to create a simple cylinder. I'm going to draw out the height to be about the depth of the actual Boolean operation, and then you'll see there's a straight line running through the center and a straight line running through the horizontal axes. Essentially that's what I'm looking for. So I made the cylinder first, and I obviously checked if this is what I was looking for, and I'm just looking for a nice clean division through the center axes in a 90-degree split. And then I'm going to subtract or get rid of these polygons down here at the bottom. I missed two of them. There we go. And I will just quickly loop select the open edge, the border, and I'm going to go ahead and shift right click and say extrude edges. I will then jump to my regular move tool by pressing W. I'm going to move this down to get the actual depth of it, and I will then use my mesh and then fill hole, and then finally I'm going to make use of my shift right click multi-cut tool, and I'm going to split right across there. So now that my mesh is nice and clean again, everything is quaded out except for these over here. I'm not too concerned about that. Now this is going to be our subtraction piece into our model. So then I'm going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees upwards, and I'm holding down J as a snap while I'm rotating, and that's going to give me the ability to snap align this in an increment. I'm also going to align this to the grid so that this is nice and clean. I definitely feel like this is way too big. I'm going to shrink this down, bring it forward. Might be a bit too small now. I'm going to go to wireframe, and this is going to show me how deep I want to push this object into my model. So if I feel like it's still not deep enough, I can always go and use my regular scale by pressing R, and I'm scaling along the y-axis, the green cube. Great stuff. Now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and actually align these edges to the existing edges on my model. This keeps it nice and clean, so once the Boolean operation is done, that I can then easily connect these edges together, and I know where they're supposed to be connected to. For the same thing, I could also say that maybe we should have a center axis running down the center of this little house. That's going to allow me to connect to this edge. And maybe that's a good thing that let's tackle that first. I'm going to go to my edge mode. I'm going to go to my mesh tools. I'm going to use the multi-cut, and this is going to allow me to essentially divide the model using kind of some sort of an insert edge loop function by holding down the control key. So holding down the control key while inside of the multi-cut tool, it acts like an insert edge loop tool. So I want to divide along this edge over here. Together with control, I'm going to hold down shift, and that's going to allow me to constrain this to degrees. And if we hit the 50% mark, this is going to split it right through the center, and that's going to allow me to keep it nice and clean. And as we can see, it's right on that edge. That's exactly what I was looking for. So after that, we essentially need to decide how we want to connect these across the model. And we can predefine this ahead of time, or we can decide to rather do that after the fact. I'm going to do that after the fact, just so you guys can see a slightly different approach to this. And then yep, so now it's time essentially to do the Boolean subtraction. Essentially, Boolean requires an object that needs to be the main subtraction object, and then a piece that we will be subtracting it from. And so the order of selection is, this is the object that will be subtracted from, and this is the object that we're going to subtract. So I'm going to pick these two in that order. I'm going to select this one first, this one second, and then I'm going to go ahead and say difference. Now, it is a good thing to keep in mind, in the difference operation there is two types of intersection modes. We're not going to talk about the classic algorithms, we're just going to work with the new operations in 2015. We have normals and we have edges. If we choose normals, it's literally going to only subtract and leave an open hole. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm actually going to use the edge mode. By default, it is set to normal, so if I do edit reset, you can see it jumps back to there. So I went ahead before I started the video and made the option changes to edge mode. Once I hit apply, you can see the subtraction is applied, and we have now a very clean looking mesh. And we can actually see that the edges from the original model and the subtraction piece is now connected by a single vertex, since I made sure that they were aligned right off the bat. Once we've done this, now it's essentially cleanup time, where we have to connect these points to the edges, to the outside corners, and we can use the multi-cut again. And I'm going to use the multi-cut holding down. We've got 1, 2, and 3, so I'm going to divide this along the 50% mark, which is around there. I'm going to go ahead and connect this one to the outside. I'm literally just clicking, pressing enter, and I can go ahead and do the same thing there. So I'm going to go from there all the way to that upper vertex, same thing over there, upper vertex, and then finally these go around again the 50% mark maybe. It's not 50%. There we go. Connect that to the outside, and finally outside. We have one more piece that we can deal with. I'm going to snap it, line it to there, and then just go straight across, and then have these two go straight down. Enter, and there we go. Enter. Great. So that's essentially the cleanest way that we can work with booleans. Now, it does not mean that this operation works 100% every time. Like I said, if you have any weird geometry on your original mesh, then you will have some issues when trying to align these things. Or trying to subtract, rather, not align. And what's going to happen then is either both of the two models will physically disappear, and that simply means that one of the two is incorrect, and you need to go and clean the mesh up. Usually it's a good idea to go to face mode and check your mesh that you do not have. I'm going to break this on purpose so you guys can actually see what I'm referring to. Is if you see along your face that there's little dots. If you go to face mode and you go to face mode, you'll see these little dots on the sides. That simply means there's another set of faces right on the inside. If I slightly move this off, you can actually see there they are, and if I bring this back, they collapse onto its single edge, and they do not have any distance. That's a typical reason why a Boolean operation would not work. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where this occurs, you can go and click and drag over these little dots and press delete. I'm going to do that side as well. And that means that this face is now completely separated from the model. So it is important to go back to the vertex mode and then click and drag over these points and make sure you go and merge the components. And you do that per side. That's something that you have to do per side. I'm going to hit G now. G is the last command, which is the merge component tool. And once you've done that and you're trying to move this off and the whole mesh kind of comes together, follows along, that means it's now collapsed back into the same mesh, and now the mesh is clean. That's one of the problems. There's many other situations where this Boolean operation would not work. And if you do have any other kind of situations, then please comment below and I will try and assist you guys where I can. I see like there's a little problem right there, some issues that ended up happening, and that's typical of a Boolean operation that we have to keep in mind. So I'm going to use a target weld from the modeling toolkit. I'm just going to collapse these guys in to single points, check the other side, that looks nice and clean, and we are happy. Great stuff. So I'm going to show you guys the other way as well. Maybe before I do that, I need to also comment that if you guys do not see the little dots in the center of each face by default, and it looks more like a fully shaded face whenever you hover over it, then a typical thing that you can go and change is under Window Settings and Preferences. Preferences again, that brings up the Preferences window, and then in the categories you want to go to the selection over here on the left hand side, and from that window you want to change from whole face to center, and that's going to essentially allow us to pick the face selection from the center as little dots. Otherwise, if you do not have that option, you would not know if you have an extrusion that's lying right on top of another face, and then obviously that is a typical scenario where you would not know why the Boolean operation is not successful. Great stuff. So now that we have this, I'm going to go ahead and make the subtraction piece again, or I might as well just extract that from the existing mesh as a copy, and then I'm going to show you guys how we can start off from the inside and work ourselves outwards. I'm going to grow the selection, holding down the shift and then the full stop button, and that's going to allow us to grow the selection. And then I'm also going to say duplicate faces, and I'm going to go ahead and select the inside, and I'm going to center the pivot. Center pivot is modify center pivot, if you guys did not know. Right, so now that I have the subtraction piece, essentially what I want to do is I want to start off with the inside, and I want to work myself outwards. That's pretty simple. All you have to do is essentially select your border edges like this. I'm going to do an extrude on it. I'm going to use thickness. I'm going to pull out. Now, by pulling out in a negative direction, I am going to distort the geometry. So, quick tip, you can always use your scale tool to flatten this. Another tip or trick that you can use is you can actually snap vertex positions to one another by selecting the vertex, holding down V, then clicking and dragging on your axes, and then move your mouse while holding down left click. I'm going to try and align it to this vertex on the top, and that's going to constrain it only in that direction of the arrow that you have selected, and it's going to align it. So once I have that selected, I'm going to go ahead, and it seems like I have some triangles over here. I am going to collapse them in. I do not need them. It's just one extra vertex to clean up, and that's nice and clean. So now it's just a matter of me trying and orienting it in position right on top of the mesh, something like that. And I'm going to go to my front view, and can you believe it? It seems like I snapped it way back there. That should be good. And I'm going to take the model, move it forward. Essentially, we don't need this piece anymore, so I might as well move that back out of the way, or maybe I'll leave it there for the depth that we need. I'm going to go and select the bottom edges. I'm going to extrude using shift right click, extrude edge. I'm going to pull down for the height. I'm going to go to my front view plane, and I'm going to draw this out all the way to the bottom. Once I have that, I can then take all my border edges like this. I can then do the exact same thing where I extrude and then go to the regular move tool by pressing W. I'm going to pull this back. I do see that there's one point a bit skew. We can fix that later. I am going to align this, and I can see that I went a bit too far. So I'm going to pull this right on top of that axis. I'm going to take the back points. I'm going to bring them to where they're supposed to be. I can see my pivot is back to my original center of the world axis. I can do a modify center pivot. Bring this back forward, and wrong one selected. That's the one I want. And now I just need to fill the gap at the back, and then once I have that filled, I need to go ahead and actually bridge the edges together, or we can use the multi-cut to connect across. So I'm going to go, first of all, select one of the open edges, and I'm going to go to mesh, and I'm going to fill the hole, and then I can use the multi-cut in the modeling toolkit, and then just connect one point to another, one point to another, and so on and so forth. There we go. Let's have a look. We need one going straight up, and essentially we have now successfully done a Boolean operation without using a Boolean operation. We've essentially started with a negative shape. We've essentially extruded the edges out, and then we aligned them to the reference object, snapped them to the points where we want to have them create the profile of the shape of the model. And once I'm done with that, essentially I just extrude out, connect the points at the back, and once I'm done with it, I have the model. So I'm going to spend a few seconds quickly just straightening everything out, because I messed up somewhere. I need to use my scale tool, and I'm going to scale all the way to the center, and that keeps it nice and flat for me. Good. Finally, now that we have done the Boolean operation, it's essentially just repeating the same process multiple times. And if we look at this model over here, the first one was done essentially exactly the same way, and I've copied the shape, tweaked it a bit, and I'm essentially ended up with this piece. And I've done another extrude outwards, and I've straightened the edges on the sides, and that allowed me to then make a cube or some sort of a rectangle shape out of it, and that I can then snap to the next and the next and the next, and finally combine everything, and then do vertex weld or component merge, and that's going to collapse everything to one single point. And that's how I essentially got to this result. Now you'll see there's a lot of lines running all over the place. I had to add enough geometry and edges all over to make sure that these points have a place to connect to. Like over here, you can see this is an open model. If I were to go to vertex mode and I pull this open, you'll see it still does not have a point to connect to. That's a typical area where I would use the multi-cut, and I would then try and align it to that specific point. I would add the geometry, and then I can use the target weld to then weld those points together. Over here, this one missed, so it might be slightly off. I can grab that edge, move it closer, and then use the target weld, and then weld these points together. Click and drag. Oopsie. Always make sure you try and connect it. Let's see what's going on over here. There we go, great stuff. You'll see that it looks like there's a staggered line. On this side it's a lot cleaner. It simply means that we need to just make sure that we connect these points, weld them in properly, and that will clean up the mesh, and the result would be a perfectly Boolean model that has supporting edges connecting to everything, and the result is exactly what we need. At the end of the day, what's going to happen is you're going to have the subtracted piece that looks similar to this, and then you can add the extra little frames around it to make it stand out a bit more. So if I were to look at this guy, like that one, I can move out, and then same thing with that one, I can move it out. Good stuff. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I will make sure I get back to you. And as always, subscribe and like and share with all your friends. And if you feel like there's any new type of tutorials or tips or tricks that you would like to know about, please let me know, and I will try and find a way to make that happen. And I will see you guys next time. Cheers. Bye.